Hi guys, welcome back to today's video. Today's video is mainly historical and I'm super excited to be checking this out with you guys because I never knew there was a war between the US and the UK, like British and American war. Really, I never knew. I mean, I'm just seeing this for the first time, and no, I think I've heard about it, but I've really not gone in depth of what happened. So today you're opportuned to see this together with me. This is coming from knowledgia. It's titled The British American War in 1812, explained in 13 minutes. So this is going to be very brief, and I'll be dropping my thought during the course of the video and after the video. Before I dive into it, my name is Oge. Welcome to the channel. If it's your first time here, do want to like, share, subscribe, drop a comment, and turn on the post notification bell. Let's quickly check this out together.
In 1812, the young nation of the United States took on the country with the most powerful navy in the world in a war that would affect more than just the former colonies and their colonizer. The United States of America first gained freedom from the British in an 8-year-long Revolutionary War that finally came to a close when Britain inevitably recognized the independence of their 13 former colonies on September 3rd, 1783. One of the most relevant impacts of this war that would fuel future tensions between the US and Britain once again was the role of the Native Americans. And as a fan of our channel, you should check out our friends over at CuriosityStream. This is my personal favorite streaming service, a place where I can watch thousands of incredibly well-made documentaries and learn more about different topics, including what I love most, history. One of my favorite documentaries is about the topic of today's video, the War of 1812. By watching it, you will learn more about the impressive history of the United States and the United Kingdom, the rivalry between both nations, and the details of the war, also named the Second American War of Independence. This war was very important because it could have changed history as we know it. Because you are our subscriber, we have a special offer for you. If you sign up between November 16th and January 3rd, you can get 25% off a yearly subscription. That's unlimited access for only $14.99 a year. So use the code knowledgia when you sign up and get 25% off your yearly subscription. During the Revolution, the Native Americans mostly supported the Brits, who they hoped would continue to restrict expansion from the US settlers into Native American territory. When Britain failed to maintain its rule over the colonies, the United States eventually accelerated its takeover of native land, causing even more friction between the American societies. This friction only grew stronger as the years went on, as Britain remained a driving force of the discord, since not only had the natives taken its side in the Revolution, but the British also openly encouraged the Native Americans to fight back against their antagonists. By 1812, this, combined with a few other factors, led to the development of a new war. While the United States was clearly unhappy with the united opposition from Britain and the natives, they were also infuriated by allegations that the Royal Navy was utilizing a tactic known as impressment to take US men for their own troops. On top of this, the ongoing strife between Britain and France had a notable impact on the United States. Heavily locked in their own struggle, the warring nations tried to restrict trade from neutral countries and punish anyone who attempted to ignore the constraints. This put the United States in a detrimental position due to their inability to continue trade with either nation unless they wanted to risk invoking the wrath of the other side. While France took a more laid-back approach to ensure the US abstained from doing business with the British, the latter was more aggressive about the matter. On January 7th, 1807, Britain issued an order in council stating, "It is hereby ordered that no vessel shall be permitted to trade from one port to another, both which ports shall belong to or be in the possession of France or her allies, or shall be so far under their control as the British vessels may not freely trade. Furthermore, any ships that refused to obey these restrictions would be subject to seizure by the Royal Navy, cargo and all. By November, the original order was expanded, now to include all the ports and places of France and her allies, or of any other country at war with His Majesty, and all other ports or places in Europe, from which, although not at war with His Majesty, the British flag is excluded, and all ports or places in the colonies belonging to His Majesty's enemies. In retaliation, France, under the command of Napoleon Bonaparte, issued the Milan Decree, which said that every ship, to whatever nation it may belong, that shall have submitted to be searched by an English ship or to a voyage to England, or shall have paid any tax whatsoever to the English government, is thereby, and for that alone, declared to be denationalized, to have forfeited the protection of its king, and to have become English property. Adding on, Napoleon declared that any of the aforementioned ships that enter French ports or those of French allies are good and lawful prizes of his nation. Forced to reply, U.S. President Thomas Jefferson signed the Embargo Act in December of 1807, blocking all international trade from American ports and taking direct aim at Britain. Unfortunately for America, the act backfired and turned the U.S. into more of a victim than anyone else. Emphasizing this point, the Minister to France himself even said, "Here it is not felt, and in England it is forgotten." The effects of the Embargo Act ultimately pushed the U.S. into an economic depression, and it had to be repealed less than 2 years after the initial signature. In its place, the Non-Intercourse Act was passed, which directly forbade trade with Britain and France and their colonies. When this new act still proved to be ineffective, the United States tried once again, this time passing Macon's Bill No. 2 in May of 1810. This bill lifted trading bans and stated that if either France or Britain removed their own restrictions, the U.S. would re-establish an embargo with the opposing nation. By August, Napoleon enacted a plan to exacerbate tension between Britain and the United States, and it ultimately worked. He first told the new president, James Madison, that he intended to exempt the U.S. from his previously established Berlin and Milan decrees, promoting Madison to bring back the Non-Intercourse Act constraints against Britain in November of that year. Despite the fact that Napoleon never actually followed through on his proclamation, Britain and the United States were now on the brink of all-out war. The final straw came when the Battle of Tippecanoe unfolded in late 1811, as the U.S. troops claimed victory over the Native Americans, wishing to stop further expansion once again. Given the United States was fairly confident in the belief that the British were supplying the natives with weapons from Canada, a faction of the U.S. Republican Party known as the Warhawks began a heavy push towards an official declaration of war. At last, on June 18, 1812, President James Madison signed the declaration against Britain, despite contention about the issue coming from both the House and Senate. Another problem emerged as well when Britain decided to suddenly...
There is always one problem or the other. I never knew the war was this deep. Like, it looked really deep, and I feel like a lot of Americans and young Britain, even though these things should be taught in schools, which is very important, because it's very important for you to know your history and what your country have been through. It's very important. Like, history is very important. We cannot even overemphasize the importance of history in schools, from primary schools to where kids were growing. You know, they need to start introducing it to them, which I think they do, because right from when I was also growing up, history was introduced into my primary school. So the little ones I could understand, the secondary school, then the university, you know, history was introduced, because you really need to know as a person, especially as an adult, what your country have been through. This is actually a lot. From one now, it is even between the US, the UK, and France, the natives, France. Wow, this is actually deeper than I thought. But let's quickly complete the video, then we'll drop our comment at the end of this video.
suddenly repeal their trade restrictions before news of the US declaration of war actually reached the British over a month later. Aware of this delay, Britain decided not to immediately respond to the call of war and waited to see how the Americans would react to their repeals. When the US got wind of this surprising development, they were in turn unsure of how the Brits would react to their declaration of war. Ultimately, the United States decided to follow through on its proclamation and did so by invading Canada, which was a British colony at the time. While the American troops hoped to capture Canadian land to force Britain into negotiation, they had no such success. No one was prepared for war. The British and French have been busy fighting their own battles, and
I mean, the worst time to attack a country is when they are not even prepared. That way you will easily conquer. So I think it's a strategy of war, right? When you attack them when they are not even noticing, when they are not. But the US actually sent a message that they are declaring war, right? But the British were like, they didn't pay attention to it, and then they attacked they attacked Canada. Of course, those ones already had their issues already. Wow.
And the US military was grossly ill-suited to take on the likes of Britain. The defeats were plenty and humiliating for the Americans. One excessively humbling loss for the US happened when General William Hull surrendered Fort Detroit on August 16, 1812, and his own army to the British troops, and allowed Michigan territory to be deemed as part of Britain. Chased across the Canadian border, as Hull saw the size of his opponent's forces, which was a mix of British and Native American troops, and knowing that his daughter and grandchild were in the fort, he decided to give up without a single shot being fired. Hull's disgraceful failure led to an uptick in Native American raids in the Northwest and British conflict under the command of Major General Henry Proctor. Adding insult to injury, U.S. Brigadier General Henry Dearborn struggled to make any progress on the northeastern border because the militias in New England were not supportive of the war and uninterested in coming together for an attack on Montreal. By October, the Americans were finally able to get some momentum as Major General Stephen von Rensselaer led an army of 3,100 militiamen into the Battle of Queenston Heights. Rensselaer sent some advanced units across the river where they were able to hold their ground for some time on a slope just above Queenston and were successful until they were overcome by British forces as the rest of the American troops refused to join the fight. 925 U.S. soldiers were then captured by the British, despite Major General Isaac Brock on the British side being killed during the battle. Yet again, the Americans took another hit in 1813 when an attempt to retake Detroit resulted in a massacre of U.S. prisoners by their Native American opponents. On top of that, Brigadier General Henry Dearborn was replaced by Major General James Wilkins. At long last, though, in September of 1813, U.S. Commodore Oliver Hazard Perry scored a major naval victory at Lake Erie against the forces of British Captain Robert Barclay and opened the gates for more success on the American side. When the Battle of the Thames erupted the following month, the U.S. finally defeated the British and Native American allied forces.
Oh, finally.
The next spring season, at the Battle of Horseshoe Bend, a U.S. militia force faced off with a Native American force known as the Red Sticks and found victory once again, demanding that the losing side cede roughly 23 million acres of land, which would later become Alabama and span partially into Georgia. Another win for the United States followed in the summer, July of 1814, at the Battle of Chippewa, but it was short-lived as the Battle of Lundy's Lane ended in a bloody stalemate shortly after, forcing the Americans to withdraw. The real deciding factor in the war came when Napoleon faced his first exile, allowing Britain to shift more focus to the discord with the United States. The British sliced through the US, destroying government buildings including the White House as they took control of Washington, D.C. The Brits then tried to push farther into Baltimore by September under the authority of General Robert Ross, but were repulsed at the Battle of North Point, where General Ross was killed. In the battle that inspired the US national anthem, more British troops were fought off at Fort McHenry. As these conflicts raged on, peace talks began in Ghent and eventually resulted in a signed treaty on December 24, 1814. Still, just as with the declaration of war, the news was delayed and took until February 18, 1815 to officially be ratified and end the war. The Treaty of Ghent reverted things back mostly to how they were before the combat, with a status quo antebellum. All territory was returned. Britain repealed their trade restrictions, stopped supporting the Native American revolts, and ended their impressment strategies. In the end, the war was essentially a draw, and the only real losing side was the Native Americans, who had high hopes for British help in stopping US expansion. Britain was able to claim victory against the French, and in a way, against the US. Meanwhile, the US had the pride of more or less winning their second war of independence.
The war started in 1812 and it ended in 1818 or 1815. That's 3 years. That is a very long time. I know that this is nothing compared to the Polish history and how much they had to fight. Oh gosh, like, it's very important we know our history so that we can appreciate what our forefathers and ancestors did for us. These days we are enjoying, even though, I mean, Russia, Ukraine, Israel, you know, a lot of these countries are still fighting, but it cannot be compared to what these people actually went through. Imagine fighting a war for 10 years, 8 years. I can't even imagine. Like, who is going to survive it? Who will survive it? Like, war is such a horrible thing. And all this war is just trying to gain ground, their boundaries, and all of those kind of things. Now we are enjoying the labor or the fruits of what these people have fought and lost their lives for. Now we enjoy a lot of it. There is no war anyway because war is such a horrible thing. Ah, man. This was so, I don't even know the word to use to describe this, but it was a lot to take in. Between the, finally they had to sign a treaty, and you know, they're now in agreement with certain things. This was very insightful. I never knew the in-depth of, you know, the British-American War in 1812. I only heard about it, but I never knew the in-depth of the war. It was a lot, actually. It was a lot. The US actually went through hell. No, it was a lot to take in. Anyway, let's know what you think about this video. Which part of this video was not mentioned properly? Which one was misinterpreted? What other is history about the British-American War was not mentioned? And you'd love us to know. Kindly let us know in the comment section so we can learn and build from that together. I'm not very familiar with a lot of this history, so it will do me a lot of good if you can just explain certain parts of this history that maybe was not properly explained or properly mentioned here, so me and every other person that watches this video. So it's important that you drop your comment. So when you drop your comment, you like, you subscribe, you know, it pushes this video out, and we are also learning the history of the American-British War in 1812. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you in my next episode. Bye.